Thanks very much, Mark. I'm joined by Congressman Kevin Brady. He's the Vice Chairman of the Joint Economic Committee, also a member of the Ways and Means Committee. Thank you for the time. Appreciate it. You were in that conference meeting this morning with House Speaker Boehner. We've already reported on some of the choice words he had for colleagues there, trying to urge unity. Where does this stand right now within the conference?
I think momentum's building for the Boehner plan. One, because, it's our philosophy that we're going to cut more than we allow for borrowing authority. It's cut first, so cutting $3 trillion before there is significant debt ceiling increase. And then the fact that there won't be tax increases. We really have drawn the line in the sand on that issue. It complies with that principle. So the momentum, I believe, is building toward that vote.
And to be clear, you're a yes vote right now?
I am a yes.
He can only have 33 defections, assuming there are no Democrats backing it. Do you think at the end of the day he's got 217?
Yes, I do. We're not looking for Democrat votes. We're going to do this within the Republican conference. Yes, there's some healthy disagreement, mainly because we are all seeking a shrinking of the government. We just have a little different views on how best to do it.
So walk me through the end game here. Assuming it does pass tomorrow, his hand clearly strengthened at that point, but you've got Senate Democrats today saying, listen, that plan is a non-starter. Senator Reid's working on his own. Some people have suggested there are some areas of commonality between the two. What's the end product here?
I think at the end of the day, I know the president wants cuts and tax increases. We know the Senate wants the same, but the House is firmly convinced that's the wrong solution. So at the end of the day, I think it's a cut first bill. Hopefully $3 trillion or higher, and I think we get it done by the default date.
Do you have to have a second debt ceiling vote or additional debt ceiling votes before Election Day? Because for the president, for the White House, they're repeating again, listen, move this issue past Election Day through the end of 2012, get it off the plate. The cloud that's hanging over the economy and the threat of a downgrade right now, take that off the table, yet Republicans seem insistent on not allowing that to happen.
The reason is we're not holding the president's feet to the fire or looking at his election. We're trying to hold Congress's feet to the fire to make sure we actually get the cuts, especially the savings for our entitlement programs before we move further into the debt ceiling. So it really is, I think, our commitment to making sure Congress creates real cuts for the future.
I know this is something you focused on at the JEC about the cloud hanging over the economy right now. To what extent is this debate in and of itself hurting the U.S. economy right now? Would it be good for this economy for you all to resolve this and, again, push this issue to a later time?
I think it does have some impact, adds to the uncertainty. I think at the end of the day, if we get this right on shrinking the size of government and we create some investor confidence back into the United States, I think that helps the job forecast going forward. I think getting it right makes a difference.
Standard & Poor's has suggested the target here for getting it right is $4 trillion in deficit reduction over 10 years, or just maybe they're prepared to downgrade the United States. What do you think the realistic chance of a downgrade is right now, either before August 2nd or even after, on the chance you all do get a deal?
Yeah, I think it's more likely that we'll have one agency at least downgrade. I think that's a mistake. I feel like they're pulling numbers out of their ears, frankly, and becoming much more political than they ought to be. I think what they ought to really look at is, do we get serious about the future entitlement programs? Are we putting in place some of those caps, some of that fiscal discipline? We do that regardless of the number. I think we've got a strong case.
Some of your Republican colleagues have raised questions about the idea of impaneling yet another commission, a committee, whatever we want to call it, lawmakers tasked with doing that long-term deficit reductions plan, saying this is the job of Congress, lawmakers, everyday lawmakers, to make these decisions. Where do you stand on that? Is that a wise decision, or is it, again, kicking this can down the road and putting this in the power of just a handful of lawmakers?
Well, normally I'm not big on commissions, but in this case, as a committee of lawmakers, they have a defined time, a defined role, and unless they report real cuts, we're going to be back in this place, early spring next year. So there's an action forcing timetable for that committee. Because of that, I think it can help.
Now, you talked about taxes. There are going to be Democrats that say, listen, the only way this committee works from a Democratic standpoint is if they consider, again, spending cuts, entitlement program changes, and revenue. At the end of the day, you can be willing to accept at least the notion that revenue is on the table again.
Tax increases are off. Revenue, my view, asset sales that are reasonable, privatizing government functions that ought to be in the private sector. Our global competitors have raised revenues without raising taxes by shrinking the size of their government. I don't think that's ever been off the table. The problem is with the president and Democrats, it's all tax increases. You look at $1 trillion, it's big tax increases.
This gets done by August 2nd?
I believe so.
All right.
Certainly hope so.
Kevin Brady with a somewhat optimistic view of the situation here on Capitol Hill. Mark, we'll send it back to you in New York.